Welcome to LDS Faith in Crisis. This is your host, The Birds. I'm Alexis, and this is my dad.
I'm Theron. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Dad?
Doing great.
Okay, great. So we're going to start off with our next question. I feel like I'm excited for every question, but this question is the authority, like the priesthood authority of the church, real? Like, is it legit? Is it actually Jesus Christ's authority? Is that concept even like a real thing? Is it real? Tell me, Dad. Is it real?
Sure. So one of the things that's cool about that question is that the answer is that yes, it is real. Jesus Christ gave authority to men, and that authority is what they use when they act in His name to do the works that He would do if He was there.
Okay, great. So my dad says yes. We're going to let him expound a little bit as to why. But before we get there, I want to really... There's so many people who sit and define what priesthood authority is, or authority. This word gets just thrown around. Yes, we need to define it, because
sure.
Here's what I will even... Before you define it, I'm going to give my supposed definition, my
sure.
my illiterate definition, my illiterate, wow, that word's hard, definition. So I would say the authority, if we're using Latter-day Saint verbiage, is the authority to act in God's name,
sure.
to take the place of Jesus in your life and to do the ordinances of the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? It's like to stand where Christ would stand, to be who He would be, you know?
If He were only here.
If He were only here, yeah. It just feels very
yeah.
It's great, I'm sure. And it is great in theory, you know? It's great. But there's also a little bit of, one, I would say, elaboration on what that legitimately means in our everyday life, at least in my opinion. Because we, especially nowadays, are prescribing priesthood authority to most things in the church, including apparently we now use priesthood authority when we're just doing our regular everyday callings. And I'm you know what? I'm sure that I am doing service and Jesus Christ would serve, but we don't have to take it to that level. And so, that's my opinion.
Sure. But
it makes it so that when we talk about real authority, when it comes to ordinances and covenants, for example, or actions that lead to salvation, I feel because we're using the same authority to talk about the nice primary president who's giving a great
sure. lesson
in church, we give the same word to someone who's doing the ordinance of baptism, and it's just I feel it makes it feel vague.
So we should talk about authority, right? So authority is the right given by an individual to another individual to do something. Let's just keep it simple. Authority is the right given to an individual to do something.
Everyone always gives analogies. The one I'm going to use in this example, for some reason, the one that's coming to mind is I give my husband the right to have access to my medical records.
Yep. You gave him that authority.
It's basically just permission. But I feel again, it still seems different to me.
So let's keep going. So we understand that priesthood is authority, but priesthood is actually also power. True priesthood and authority is both power and authority to do that which is required for the salvation of mankind. So generally speaking, it's for example, and we have to also understand, to put it in scope, the priesthood authority that we have been talking about today is ecclesiastical priesthood. It's priesthood being used in a organization of the church. And that priesthood in this organization is to fulfill the role of that organization, the purpose. And the purpose that we have for an organization or a church is there's threefold really. It's to perfect the members, and it's also to redeem the dead, and it's also to, spread the gospel. Those are the general principles. But it's the main purpose is to bring all mankind unto Jesus Christ, so that they accept him as their Redeemer, and so that they do those things that are required by him to receive a remission of their sins. And so that's the general reason why authority is even of any value whatsoever.
So I'm hearing two interesting things from you right now. I don't know if my audience totally caught on to this, the audience did or not, but hopefully listeners did as well. You pointed out two things specifically. You pointed out priesthood authority as like a concept, but you also pointed out priesthood power as a separate, related thing with regards to priesthood. And I think that's a useful thing to think about, because the original question is the authority of the church real versus is the power of the priesthood real? Mm-hmm. And maybe that's I think that could be like a whole nother thing, because that leads me in totally different directions than authority in my head. And
we should hold that off, because that is a discussion unto itself.
I agree. So if we're sticking to the idea of is the authority of the church real, one of the things that comes to mind that we're really talking about is, did Jesus Christ actually give the organization of the church permission to be his church on the earth? Would you agree? Mm-hmm. That's really what we're talking about.
Yes, and we're saying that in multiple different ways, right? So those of us who have studied the New Testament know that there was a time when Jesus Christ set his disciples apart, and he sent them forth 2 by 2 to preach the gospel. And he actually gave them authority to go and do these things in his name, to go and teach the gospel, as well as they began to perform miracles in his name. They were healing the sick and
but that would be the power part.
Well, the power came with the authority. Without actual authority, then the power isn't there. The sons of Sceva is a really good example if you look it up in the New Testament. It's a bunch of these Pharisees or Sadducees, I forget which, who decided that they, since, Jesus Christ can cast out devils, that they could too, right? And so they went in there and tried to use Jesus' name to cast out a devil, and it didn't work. In fact, the devil attacked them. Well, he was in the man at the time. The man attacked them and beat them up. It didn't work. So priesthood authority and priesthood power go hand in hand. Or can go hand in hand.
The other thing that comes to mind, though, is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints definitely claims to have sole authority.
Yes. Now, when we say sole authority, we're speaking of in an ecclesiastical manner, in association with the ordinances of the gospel. Yes.
Right, which is basically to say that no other church on earth has authority to offer the ordinances of salvation to the children of God.
That is plainly our claim. We believe that.
I mean, that's a big claim, though, right? And it matters if it's real or not.
Yes, it does.
Right? Because if Jesus Christ really actually gave only the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sole authority to perform the ordinances of salvation, we're talking about a really small group covering a massive number of people.
Sure.
Which at times can feel, and to many is a little questionable.
Well, it's definitely daunting.
Well, it's more than daunting. It's also you can look at it kind of like the lifting of the snake on the staff. It seems like it's is that even a thing? Is that actually possible? Why would God give a church that small, right, sole responsibility for saving everybody? And does that really make sense when you have people all over the world of different cultures? And I believe me, I grew up in the church. I've heard the arguments about the gathering of Israel and how we're performing work on both sides of the veil, right? So we get this idea of if they don't get it now in this life, then they must be getting it in the afterlife, right? So there are aspects of the doctrine of the gospel of Jesus Christ that theoretically does make it possible for them to, quote unquote, save everybody with that small one church. But it's also like, why? Why would God do that? And so, and that question of like, well, why? Meaning it seems like he's making it slightly more complicated for himself and for us than it would be to just make it like clear, like easier by having it be held by multiple like churches, you know?
Well, actually what's happening is the administration has changed throughout time. If you look at it, before the law of Moses, they didn't have a hierarchical structure of religious authority.
Right, and like you and I have talked about this offline before, in that they had a familial order of priesthood, and so the authority was handed through generations of families and held by both matriarchs and patriarchs, so mother and father, and had different roles and responsibilities within their home to pass the ordinances of salvation down to their children and to future generations.
And so there's been
That's
a
like
difference.
Abrahamic times.
Yeah, there's a difference both in the society and culture of the time and the technological capability and capabilities of the individuals that lived at that time. That was also part of the reason why there wasn't a hierarchy and structure. It was impossible for them to communicate across vast distances. It was difficult for them to answer each other's questions or to have this sort of structure in a society where, you know, the only thing you know is your valley or your village.
Sure, and I think it makes sense that, like, in the past, without the kind of infrastructure, basically is what you're describing, like social infrastructure makes it possible for us today to have an organization like the church that is able to administer or provide the gospel of Jesus Christ as well as ordinances of salvation to people as like a hierarchical structure. But even outside of that, you know, we've had conversations at other times about how families today are obviously not holding together in the same belief system. And so it doesn't really make sense to have families be the source of the ordinances of salvation, because families aren't really like holding generationally to the gospel of Jesus Christ. They're not really that strong right now.
No. So it's progressed. It's a better organization to have it independent of the family or the tribe.
Because before, it's like it might pass from father to son or from mother to daughter, like on through the generations. But if you have like differences of beliefs in your families and your sons and daughters are choosing to believe different things than you did, and their kids are doing different things than their kids, and so on and so forth, it's like to expect them all to like continue to offer those ordinances in their family lines doesn't really make sense.
And in fact, part of the reason, what's interesting, part of the reasons why in the Old Testament they were explicitly told not to marry outside of these specific lineages was for that exact purpose, to try to keep the gospel within their family consistent.
Sure. And like, just so if you guys follow me on Instagram individually, I just recently did 2 paintings, one titled Rebekah and one titled Esau, about a faith-divided family in the Old Testament, because the story of Rebekah and Isaac and Jacob and Esau really is like a fabulous example of why it wouldn't make sense for familial priesthood to be the sole authority today, because Esau did not believe and married a Canaanite woman, left God's covenant, and his parents lied to him and cheated him out of his birthright and blessing and gave it to his brother, and like their family was estranged for generations. Like it created this huge like generational problem of like the Edomites, which are descendants of Esau, versus like the posterity of Jacob. And so like, and the Gentiles and whatnot. Anyway, it created like this huge issue, just because their family wasn't handling those faith differences very easily. And like the same thing happens in modern day families all the time. And so I write about like families and faith crisis and how we can navigate those things, because it's a really difficult topic. But all of that to be said, to connect it back to like why this matters at all to the authority piece, it's like the church in some ways does sort of like, I can even agree, sort of recover for this problem, meaning
does.
because we have an outside structure outside of families, like we're able to maintain an organization of the church which can continue to offer these blessings to people regardless of whether they're part of our like biological family or not. So I get that part. It's just the idea that like there's only one church then.
Yeah.
Like and because of that, like there's a lot of big implications for that. And
no, we don't
like
claim
that
to
is our
have,
claim.
We don't claim to have all truth or anything like that, but we do claim to be authorized to perform the ordinances of salvation.
Well, and like the only ones authorized.
Mm-hmm. And why that matters is because one of the roles of the church is to offer those ordinances. And not only to offer them, but to record them. If you don't record them, then how do you know they were done? And we have the authority in the church to not only record in earth, but record in heaven. So the ordinances performed under this authority are not just for this earth, but their effects last into the next life.
And some of what you just shared, I feel like I have different feelings about, like
sure.
the recording piece and whatnot. But like, I want to stick to this idea of like the claim that we're the only one, because that's part of what it means that it's real.
Yeah.
In some senses, right? It's like if it's real and we're agreeing with what the church says about God's authority, then like we are legit the only ones.
Yes. That's our claim. And by the way, a lot of people hate that claim.
Well, you can kind of see why.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and
I don't think anyone, and it makes some church members very prideful, right?
Sure.
It can create a lot of interesting dichotomies with other religions that I think can sometimes be painful.
Let's talk a little bit about the basis of why this even matters, right? So we believe that the church is actually an organization of government. It's God's government. It's a theocracy, and that Jesus Christ is the leader of the church, right? In any organization or structure, if you do not have authority, and that authority is not controlled, authorized, and regulated, the only thing that will be achieved is chaos rather than the goal. So, for example, if I'm driving down a street and Alexis sees me and I'm going 25 miles an hour and it's a 15, surely she should pull me over and give me a ticket, right?
Or if you're a Utah driver, you're not quite driving fast enough to get pulled over, but maybe if you're going like 35...
Even 70. What if I'm going 70 in a 35? Does Alexis have the right, the authority?
No, because I'm not a police officer.
And authority
so I guess,
matters.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying as far as like, nobody can just do it willy-nilly. I've heard these arguments before, I'm sure, so is our audience, that like you need to have a structure and organization and blah, blah, blah to like make it happen. But like, that's not really how the Spirit speaks to us. The Spirit speaks to all people. So why not have God's authority given to those who are righteous?
He does.
Period.
In fact, some people will claim what you're claiming right there, and they call that a priesthood of believers, where basically, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ and you've read the Scriptures, then you have all the authority that you need. The only problem with that is that, as you can see in the different sects that exist in the Christianity in our current world today, they have differing beliefs upon certain essential ordinances of the gospel, such as, baptism, whether it's allowed to be baptized via immersion or whether the procedure by which baptism is administered is in question and in doubt. Which way is it allowed? Is it allowed that you can baptize yourself? My heavens, I've seen videos of people diving into the water and they have baptized themselves.
So basically you're saying,
there's a proper way and means by which these ordinances are to be performed. And it's done through that authority to make sure that it's done in the proper way and by the proper reason too.
I mean, I could say proper way, schmopper way. Like you could say that there's not a right way, that God is like, and honestly, many Christian denominations do. They'll say to believe in Jesus Christ is what you need for salvation.
Sure.
Baptism's just like a little cherry on top. Like, it's not really necessary for salvation. And they'll even point to, like, the guy who was on the cross, the thief who was on the cross next to him, who, like, was to be in the kingdom of heaven, right? Like, there are these examples, and I feel like we're kind of sliding off topic here. But I think the reason you're bringing these things up, from my perspective, is basically because if there is such a thing as authority, then the church does have it, then those kinds of, like, differences of belief become really important.
They do.
And so, like, I understand why you're saying that from the perspective of somebody who believes all of those things, but if you're someone who doesn't believe all of those things,
Sure.
like, all of that can just be disregarded.
Yeah. But there is a logical reason why you have to have authority and an organization and structure. Like I just told you, right? If you have a government or an organization without authority, there's only chaos.
Right. I guess what I would
God
say
is
is,
a
like,
God of law and order. His house is a house of order.
how do we know that?
Because he gives us commandments and he tells us how we're supposed to live our life. Because he is a God of order and he has a goal and a purpose for us. He doesn't just willy-nilly let us go out and do whatever the heck we want and say, my will is
So
okay.
you're basically saying that because you believe God to be a God of order, it only makes sense for God to have an authority.
In fact,
Because otherwise he would head towards chaos.
Yeah,
And the church would head
if
towards
he was
chaos.
the God of, if he was, so sometimes people will say God is sovereign and he can do whatever the heck he wants. If that were really the case, then there is no need for him to delegate his authority to anybody. Why would he?
But
He can
does
let
God
people
have
do
needs?
whatever they want.
You know?
Yeah, what?
I guess this question does suppose, if we're going to say yes, that the church's authority is real, then we're also like, it does speak to God's character and, like, the kind of person he is and the kind of God he is
It
by
clearly
a lot.
does. Yeah.
Because, we're talking about the kind of God that would give authority to begin with,
Yeah.
or require and necessitate authority to begin with.
Yep.
So I think that might be part of the reason why this question is so important to so many Christians, and also maybe why it's a little bit triggering at times, because it does, like, speak to something about God that I think, we disagree with. A lot of Christians will disagree with Mormons and vice versa, because of what it says about God and the type of God that they're believing in,
And
the nature.
one of the things that are explicit in that whole thing right there is we believe there are requirements for salvation. That we
Which
as
is
individuals, that we as individuals must actually not only have faith, we must exercise that faith.
Mm-hmm.
We must do the things that faith would drive us to do, like James says, faith without works is dead. Totally true, right? I can believe, that food will make a person who is starving well, but if I don't give them any, it doesn't do them any good, right? So faith
Sure.
without works is dead, and faith leads to repentance once you understand that God has given us commandments and ways in which we should behave.
And there's a bit of a
Repentance is that
paradox
change.
here, because
Yeah.
there's a paradox because we also believe in grace,
Yes, we do.
that there's nothing that we can do to get to come unto salvation except through Jesus Christ and
Yeah.
except by Jesus Christ. So we should talk about grace and works and whatnot, because I feel like that's also a place that we get a lot of hate. But there's also a lot of, like, difficult arguments to be made. But I'm feeling like we've really thoroughly answered this question as to both why it's an important question to begin with, which we weren't really talking about. We did talk about it being real. Whether it's real or not, I feel like does require a level of faith. There's evidence to suggest that it's real in like Latter-day Saint beliefs about apostles and prophets, or Latter-day Saint beliefs about the nature of God. And yet, whether or not it's real in our belief is dependent upon our faith, right? Like, this coming back to this idea of proof,
So one
proof
question
is hard to
one
come by.
question you should ask yourself is, what is the evidence that priesthood is real? It's a really good question. What evidence do we have that priesthood authority is real? Right? And I can.
Okay, I don't know. Go for it.
I can give you just a little bit, right? So one of the evidences that priesthood authority is real is that through the use of the priesthood, that the spiritual gifts spoken of in the Bible and in the Book of Mormon are real in our life today. There are actual miracles that are performed through the priesthood in our lives today. So that's one way.
I mean, some people would say, where are those miracles? Because I feel like some people feel like there aren't as many miracles happening today as there were in previous times in history, especially of the miraculous, like, magical kind.
It depends on what your life has been like, whether you've seen them. They're there.
Okay.
So.
Some say they're there, some say they're not. Sure. Anyway.
I clearly
so
can
you're
tell
gonna say,
you about those. We should have actually, that would be a good discussion, is what is a miracle?
I agree.
And what is the difference between a miracle and a sign is another thing.
Sure. Let's talk about more evidence for the authority of the
so miracles are evidence that the priesthood is real. Another thing is evidence of the conversion of the human soul, where an individual is systematically and fundamentally changed through obedience to the laws and ordinances of the gospel, where they are now a new creature. If you see people change in that fundamental way, that's another evidence that the priesthood has affected them in a positive way in their life. So that's another
one of the things about that, though, is that sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. I'm just giving you evidences, right?
Yeah,
sometimes they may or may not be as powerfully visible in some lives as others based on how they live.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say, like, in this case, I think we can give evidences, but I feel like the conclusive proof is hard to come by, and that's part of the reason we have faith in general and belief. And, like, I could totally get on a soapbox and talk about how powerful belief is, because it is, like, not necessary that we have knowledge of certainty in order to create and do incredibly powerful things in this life. So I feel like that's part of what we're here to do, is to learn to act by belief. So that's like a whole side note.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's relevant in the fact that a lot of times people like myself who are on a faith journey really wish we could get to the point of proof. Like, I'm pretty comfortable at this point in my life with uncertainty. Like, it doesn't bother me nearly as much as it once did. But there was a period of time where I was like, no, I need to know. Like, I need to know for certain. Like, that's all I want. I just want to know the truth, and I just want to know for certain. That's it. Like, it would be so simple. Like, why is it not so simple?
So part of the fun on that, though, too, is that with, you know, this is a really good thing from Spider-Man or whatever. With great knowledge comes great accountability, too.
Isn't it responsibility?
Responsibility, accountability, yeah. And that's a true principle, right? So part of the reason why we are to act by faith is so that we don't condemn ourselves by having knowledge and rejecting it. An individual who doesn't know and does their best and does okay and, you know, does their best in this world is in a much better state in the justice of God than an individual who has been given the absolute knowledge of the truth and then purposefully chooses to do whatever the heck they want instead.
We will cover the judgment. Mm-hmm. So many good topics to cover. I'm going to call it short. Cut it short unless you have more to say on authority, though.
No, just
so that we
remember
can stay on
that
topic.
Part of this whole thing is that no one's ever going to be able to prove to you that they have the authority of God. And the reason why is because signs, generally speaking, aren't given.
Yeah. Yep. Until after the trial of faith.
That's correct.
Which sometimes we hate. At least I hate. Like, I even hate it, like, when people say that. Like, I said it and I was like, ew. But there's something to it in the fact that the belief, like, believing does matter in our experience. So, okay. Yep. Well,
I hope I answered that question for you. I hope you made an attempt.
I think you did.
Okay.
We wrapped around to it. We got all the way around to whether you started giving evidences for it being real, which is great. We also talked about why it's important, and why it also might be something that is walked by faith. I think there are going to be discussions that we have where it's like we can give our best evidences, but like at a certain point, you just gotta choose what you believe, and like that's
Yeah.
just kind of how it is. Like you can give some like good evidence, but you can probably give some good evidence against it, and like we will provide both of those things for you. But at the same time, like it's just kind of how it is.
It comes
So
down to a choice.
yeah, and I like hopefully I'm doing an okay job at presenting, playing the devil's advocate and arguing against it, or at least being the person who's like, I'm a little skeptical.
It's all good.
But to our listeners, if y'all have more to say, as usual, we want to hear it.
It'd be great.
We'd be so happy to hear it. So email us at ldsfaithincrisis@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram, again, LDS Faith in Crisis, and on YouTube and all the other places. So please follow along. I will be seeking for questions that maybe you guys are having that you want to have us test out and have a conversation about. So I'll be sending those out on Instagram. I'm primarily running that account, which is great because it means that we can have discussions there that my father can't see. So if you have things that you're wanting to bring up, send them out our way that way. Anything else, Dad?
No, sounds great. This was good conversation.
Perfect. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Talk to you later. Bye.